Hello and welcome to EXQ Ana Blog and Photography. My name is Steven and I'm currently at the Teluk Bahang beach, which is on the northern side of Penang Island, Malaysia. Now Penang is my own hometown, though I live on the mainland side. This is the island side of the state and it took me about an hour of driving to get here. I've been here before, so I'm familiar with this location. But in the past, I have came here just for scouting, which is to search for photography locations, but never really took any figure photos. This is my first time over here photographing a figure right there on the ground, as you can see my setup down there. Right, more on that later. Now, when it comes to photographing a figure on the beach, the most important one thing you need to bear in mind is the sea tide. Of course, you can check it online easily and pick the date that is ideal when you look at the sea tide. You do not want to be photographing on the ground with your props, your figure, your camera, and then the next 30 minutes the water will be suddenly coming up and you will be in panic mode. You do not want that to happen. You will damage things, maybe your figure, or worse, your camera. Now, even if a camera is weather resistant, which is to say water resistant to a certain extent, you do not want to mess with salt water. Salt water is very corrosive. So that is one very important thing to bear in mind. And then the second thing about outdoors in general is the weather, of course. Now, weather unfortunately is mostly about luck. The weather forecast was supposed to be bad according to the forecast I got for this location. But after I arrived here in the earlier parts of this video, before the introduction video, yeah, you saw it was pretty warm, pretty sunny. But at the moment, it seems to be turning a bit more cloudy, so this is something very unpredictable and mostly about luck. Fortunately, my props, they are water resistant. If there's a downpour, I'll just leave it there and wait for the rain to get over with, and I will resume shooting, doesn't matter. How do I know about this location in general? The best way to search for outdoor locations without even leaving your home is to make use of Google Earth and Google Maps. Look for places of interest, make use of the street view, and you might to be able to identify potentially suitable locations for figure or doll photography depending on what you shoot. When it comes to selecting your locations for figure photography, there's one more thing very important that you might want to consider, and that is the direction of the sunlight. So currently the sunlight is right here, at the side right here, right? And now currently it's about 4 p.m., 4 or 5 p.m. and the sun will set that side. So I'm photographing towards the north, and that is the west. So the sun will be setting that side. So I will not be getting a backlit scene, so which means I won't be getting a silhouette with this specific setup, which will make editing a lot easier later. I'm personally hoping for a side light. Since I'm shooting towards the north and the light is coming from the west side, I'm hoping for a side lighting which can look fantastic in photographs. And whether that will happen, that will solely depend on the weather in the next few hours. I can't control that. Now, how did I make that model on the ground? 3D printing. Nowadays, everything is just 3D printing. It is printed in several sections. The center is completely hollow. And then they are joined with hot glue. And then I will coat a layer of silicone plaster over the surface of the 3D print to erase most of the layer lines you'll see from 3D printing, and then spray paint the thing. That's simple. What you're seeing, the whole thing down there is just a product of 3D printing, nothing much going on with the props. When you shoot figures on such a scenic location, a beautiful location in general, I tend to use wide angle lenses. Normally, I would recommend you guys to use maybe a 50mm prime lens for figure photography, and that is definitely one of the better options when you are photographing indoors in a diorama or any of your own personal studio setup. You will want to use a 50mm lens or longer, maybe even a macro lens. But when you're involving a landscape, a scenario like this, a beautiful location, you will want a wide angle with your figure smaller in the frame, and you capture the whole scene to capture the vastness of the scene. So this is a bit more to art, though photography is art itself anyway. And once you have identified the location, you need to visit that place personally. Survey the location, take a look around, take a long walk, and then if you can identify spots that might be suitable for figure photography with just your phone camera. Your phone camera is a wide angle camera. So you just go low on the ground and take a few photos and see what it looks like, because the world you see with our own human eyes and the world you see low on the ground, they are two very different worlds. Now we take a look at this specific location where I set up the props over here. I decided to choose this specific place after scouting all over the place, hunting for locations. That is what we call scouting I mentioned earlier. Why did I choose this specific location? You see the rocks surrounding my setup? That is exactly what I'm looking for, because this piece of rock right here, that would be a very good foreground element. So in a wide angle photography, landscape photography, there are three things: your main subject, the background, and foreground element. The foreground element is something most people forget or miss out, and then they end up with a scenery photo with nothing in front except a vast piece of sand or grassland, which is plain, which is boring. You do not want that to happen. You need something in front of your scene that is called the foreground element. So now when you look at this setup from the top, it looks like nothing special, and then you go low. As you can see, the scene begins to take shape. It looks amazing when you go very low. So this is why scouting is so important. You will want to visit the actual location itself and go very low on the ground, take a few sample photos to identify beautiful landscapes for figure photography. As for how I attach the figure on this structure, yeah, I've drilled holes, as you can see, to plug the figure in. This extra hole right here is just to change the angle of the figure in case I have to, but I think I will be doing it this way. I mean this angle. This is the lens I'm going to use today. Okay, I'm using the Nikon Z6 for today instead of my D850 DSLR. Well, not because of weight. I don't mind carrying heavier cameras or lenses outdoors. I don't mind that at all. The thing is that this lens I'm using today is a bit unique. This is a fisheye lens, and this specific lens is only compatible with mirrorless cameras. So you cannot use mirrorless lenses on DSLRs, but you can use DSLR lenses on mirrorless cameras with an adapter. So this is the TTartisan 11mm f2.8 fisheye lens. TTartisan is a Chinese brand, and currently they only make manual lenses. Manual focus, manual aperture ring, no electronic context whatsoever. So when you look at the back of a camera scene, you will not see any aperture reading. You have to adjust the aperture right here on the ring itself, on the lens. So how much does this lens cost? About $210 US. So this is a very affordable lens for full frame cameras. And for a fisheye, I wouldn't want to spend too much money. So Samyang, they make excellent fisheye lenses, but they will cost a lot more than what TTartisan is offering here. And for a lens that I might be using maybe 3 or 5 times a year, I wouldn't want to spend too much on it. So this is an ideal lens, TTartisan 11mm. This is Banpresto EXQ Ana Medusa from Fate's Grand Order. So if you have watched Fate's Stay Night, Rider, Medusa, yeah, this is the same character but her younger version. The scene I've set up for her, you need to watch the FGO anime, FGO Babylonia, to understand the scene I made for her, right? That is, spoiler alert, Gorgon. Gorgon is an Avenger class servant, which is also Medusa, but as a different servant class, and one of the antagonists, one of the bad guys in FGO Babylonia. Yeah, you need to watch it. That is a fantastic show. Even if you don't know much about the Fate series, you can just go ahead and watch it. It has excellent fight scenes, right? Anime fights are fantastic in that show. Okay, and then she uses this is her weapon, but the chain I've attached here is my own metal chain, a real chain. I do not want to use the plastic chains that come with the figure. It's not very nice. Yeah, so I'll see what I can do with this. So I'm not going to insert this scythe, this into her right hand. I'm going to place this separately in the scene in the name of composition. Here is her weapon, and should I put it into her right hand as she is supposed to be displayed on a shelf, or should I put this elsewhere in the scene? Now let's assume my camera is over here. This mini tripod right here is my camera location, and this is the scene. So if I were to put her weapon right here in her right hand, and over here somewhere in front right here on the ground, the results are very different. And it has to do with the fact that I'm using a wide angle lens. So I will just show you a camera preview straight from my camera I'm using to photograph the figure. When you have an object far away on a wide angle lens, the object will appear very small, and when the object is very near to the camera, the object will appear huge, really huge. This is why I'm using a fisheye lens for this specific scene. It is to construct an ideal composition to make her weapon look huge in the scene, and the final photo will look really dramatic. So this is how you make use of wide angle lenses. Since you're using wide angle lens, fisheye is also a type of ultra wide angle lens. You will want to use small apertures f8 or f16 to get most of the background clear and in focus, not just the figure. For me, I would personally stick to f8 to 11 range. I wouldn't want to touch f16 because at that aperture, diffraction happens. When diffraction happens, your photos become less sharp. I do not want that to happen. You can Google more about diffraction in photography. You will get a lot of explanations. I will spare the explanation here. So I'm sticking to f8 to 11 range, and then ISO value, I'm sticking to base value as usual. ISO 100. Yeah, the lowest value possible, and to adjust how bright the scene is, I will just manipulate the shutter speed. So there's no absolute value. You choose a shutter speed depending on the situation, on the levels of lighting you're photographing in. And then how do you determine whether the photo is too bright or too dark? As I said earlier, it is very difficult to look at the camera screen under sunlight. You can't tell clearly whether your photos are too bright or too dark. So what you can do is to do exposure bracketing, which is your camera automatically takes a few shots in different settings from brightest to darkest, and then you can go back home and choose later. Or you can do it manually yourself. You fix your aperture value, you fix your ISO value, but then you take several shots with different shutter speeds from darkest to brightest, maybe 5, maybe 7 shots, and then you go back home and choose later. That is the safest move if you're unsure. Of course, on some cameras, most cameras in fact nowadays, unless you're using an old model, on the back of the camera screen, there is histogram. You can activate it. So the histogram will guide you and tell you whether your photos are too bright, overexposed, or underexposed. How to know that your photos are too bright? Very simple. You do not want the histogram, the graph, to touch the right side of the graph. If too much of the graph touches the left side of the graph, that means it is too dark, underexposed. If it touches the right side, then it's too bright, overexposed. It's just that simple. And if you were to ask me whether to take a photo that is too bright or too dark, I would rather take the photo that is slightly too dark rather than slightly too bright, because once you blow the highlights, which is the graph touches the right side of the frame of the graph itself, you won't be able to recover the details when you edit later. All the details are lost, clipped highlights as we call it. So between a slightly darker photo or a slightly too bright photo, I would choose a slightly darker photo all the time. The end result of this photography session looks like this. And yes, now that you are still watching me, actually I have not taken the photos yet. This was filmed in advance, this section of this video. So if you would like to know more about the post-production, the editing process after photographing the figure from straight out of camera to the final results, there will be a part 2 for this behind the scenes tutorial video of Ana's photography. So I do hope you check out my second video for this tutorial when I do publish it. If you do find this video beneficial or helpful to you in terms of figure photography, toy photography, please do give a like to this video and don't hesitate to subscribe to this channel. I shall see you guys again. Thank you very much and goodbye.